Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to our consultations on the full-time presidency. You may hear my little dog who is sitting on my lap as I go through this presentation. I apologize for that, but there are worse options, worse things that could be happening. So I hope everybody will bear with me and we can keep going through that. I see that we have Allison here, and I have enabled Allison to talk so that she can ask questions throughout the presentation if she wants. Since I appreciate her enthusiasm in showing up here in the heat of August to listen to this presentation. So I'll just quickly run through what I'm going to go through through the presentation. Allison, can you see my second slide with the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, good. So welcome in context, that's where we are now. The results of the evaluation of the pilot, our plans for the vote, some salary and budget questions, what we're proposing as requirements for the position of full-time president, and the necessary constitutional amendments that we'll have to make to make this a permanent part of our structure. Then, we'll discuss some additional amendments that we're wanting to make at the same time, just because, we're going to be going into the Constitution, so makes sense to kind of look at those at the same time. And then there'll be an opportunity for questions and comments. But Allison, please, feel free to chime in or ask any questions if you notice anything or you want to talk, since I'm not worried about you talking over anybody else. So there we go.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks. I really appreciate this. So basically, I mean, the context of this was that I have now been in the position of full-time paid president of PAFSO since February of 2019. And this was a pilot position that was approved at the 2018 AGM. The idea was that it was initially approved for 2 years, and then we had promised an evaluation and a vote by the whole membership on whether it would continue. So we ended up extending that pilot by a year with a vote from the full membership because of COVID, basically, because COVID hit us in March 2020, and we were not able, that was right around the time when we would have been starting the evaluation, and we were not able to do it. I mean, consultants were not available, we were swamped with other work, and so we thought it made sense to extend, and thankfully members agreed with us. So now we're where we should have been a year ago. We've had the evaluation done by Seasonova, and they concluded that the pilot had reached its goals, had met its goals, and that a full-time president was the best mechanism for PAFSO to make sure that we represented our members and that we do proper strategic planning and that we are able to do proper governance and oversight of our PAFSO office and executive director and proper management of the executive committee. So that was what they decided. Their research showed, and we know that there had been a pattern of continued support for the full-time paid presidency model, approved as a pilot by the members in 2018, the funding approved for the second year in 2019, then extended with 85% in favor, and then supported again in Seasonova's straw poll in March 2021, when 75% were in favor of full-time, 18% wanted part-time, and only 8% suggested going back to a volunteer model. So we know that this has broad support. I think that COVID really highlighted the need for someone full-time. Frankly, my head would have exploded if I had been trying to do this as a part-time person with juggling another day job. It would not have been possible. And one of the reasons that we set up the pilot was that when we did an initial study on the feasibility, and we found, I mean, I as president was putting in sometimes 20 hours a week on average, volunteer hours, just to kind of keep our heads above water. Other XCOM members were putting in upwards of 10 hours a week, and it just was not sustainable. You just can't guarantee that you're going to have somebody who is going to be able to to put in that time on a volunteer basis. And, we thought it was worth devoting some resources to this thing. So any questions or comments so far?
Nothing so far.
Okay, thanks, Allison. So our plans for the vote, one of Seasonova's recommendations, and this was always our plan from the beginning, was that this would not be made permanent without a direct vote of all the members. So we plan to hold this vote at the beginning of September. The vote will last for 10 days. And at the same time as that vote, you will also have an opportunity to vote for new executive committee members if we have enough to have an election, if they're not acclaimed, and as well as to vote on some other constitutional amendments. Because as I mentioned, we want to do some housekeeping and make some additional updates to our constitution while we're at it, basically. There will be a clear question, yes or no, on the full-time presidency, followed by a section on the constitutional amendments where you'll have an opportunity to, say yes to them all or no to them all, or vote clause by clause. And if members agree that this should become a permanent part of our structure, we will hold the nominations for the full-time presidency in January, followed by a campaign period in February and a vote at the beginning of March. So the idea is that the person who has the job would then be able to, in accordance with the assignment cycle, notify the employer that, hey, they're going to be out of the mix for headquarters assignments, at least for that year, and that they would be starting their full-time position in August. In the meantime, we're proposing to prolong the current arrangement, which is basically having me or theoretically, I guess executive committee could pick somebody else, but probably not me in the job to fill the gap, to make sure that there's no gap while that's going on. Any questions, comments?
No, not yet.
Okay. So the main question that came up in the discussion was, the question of money, right? Because the salary for an additional position is a significant part of PAFSO's budget. I mean, our budget is about 1.95 million, and the current cost of the full-time president, my salary and benefits, is about 160K. So, because I'm at the top of the FS4 pay scale. During the pilot, we did ask for and receive authorization to draw on our strategic reserves, but we never needed to do that. We always managed to cover the salary within our operating budget. Our current projections allow for funding the president's salary plus all of our current staff, including the director of administration, who has been on sick leave for a couple of years, but is part of our staff, from our annual income, our annual dues. So we wouldn't need an increase in dues, and we don't need to draw on any of the reserves, or this budget is even done without recourse to any of the interest income from the reserve. So basically we're in good financial shape, and we can do this within our means. So, that was an important question that people had, and legitimate one, but our investigations and calculations show us that we can do this. The thing is, the big question is, I mean, that's quite a lot of money. What should be the salary of the president? So, there were different questions. I mean, some people were wondering if, this is too high, this is too low. I mean, basically, my position is, and my position was and is for the future, and I think other people's positions would be the same, that nobody's going to take a pay cut to be president of PAFSO. So at a minimum, you have to be prepared to replace someone's salary. And right now, I'm at the top of the pay scale, so that was a salary that needed to be replaced. But what we did was, on the recommendation of Seasonova, we consulted a human resources company, and they've done a study. I don't actually have the final results of the study yet, but I will have it in the next few days. And they did a comparison across a whole number of nonprofits and organizations of similar size working in the Ontario kind of public sector, because the benefits and so on are parallel. And there's of course a huge range of salary in that. I mean, the highest I think was something like 700 and some thousand. And then the lowest, for a part-time position was maybe 50. But the average came out to 156,000 as base salary. So which is higher, $14,000 higher than my current salary. Which then begs the question, should the president make more than the highest paid member? And I personally think not. I personally, and I've based on our other consultations, I think we have broad agreement on this. I believe that we should set the salary as no higher than that of our highest paying member, and that's what should go in the Constitution. That's what I've proposed in the draft amendments, that it specifies the salary shall not exceed that of the highest paying member. It has a number of advantages, that kind of an approach. It means that you don't have a lot of negotiation. You have a very clear standard. It's motivating for the president, because they if they want to raise, they have to get a raise for everyone at the top of the pay band. And it also, helps it sets a good marker for, our salaries in our staff organization and so on. So, it sets a frame around everything. Now, one of the questions is whether the salary should be set at that maximum, and whoever is PAFSO president gets paid the top of the PAFSO pay scale, the FS pay scale, or whether it should be set at the individual's substantive level. And my personal recommendation is that it is set at the top of the pay scale, because the person is doing the same work. The work of the PAFSO president is going to be to manage the executive director, to lead the executive committee, to chair all the meetings, to do negotiations, to deal with, Treasury board and the political level. And, it's not fair that somebody being asked to do that same work could potentially be making $50,000 less just because they happen to be at the, an FS2 as opposed to an FS4. So that's my proposal, that the salary should be set at the top of that. Allison, do you have any questions or comments?
No, that was actually what I was going to bring up. Are we tying it to the person's substantive level, or are we tying it to everybody gets the same? And I agree with you. I think it should be the top of the FS4. It also makes it a lot easier for budget predictions, but also make sure that person, like you said, is in an equal position when they come in. Because if you tie it to their substantive position, you could have a situation where they're actually earning less than a significant portion of the office, which is also a bit demoralizing. So I think by saying the salary shall not exceed the top of the FS4 pay scale or the highest pay scale in our collective bargaining agreement, it just kind of makes it a lot more predictable. And I think it also opens it up to be more attractive of a position for people who are not necessarily in that FS4 range at this time. Like you said, nobody wants to take a pay cut to do the job, but you may get some people who are interested in doing it. And then the salary increase is just a further motivating factor.
Yeah. And I mean, there were a couple people did raise the concern. They said, what if, like this, it's a big pay boost. You could get people wanting to do it like just because they want the money. Well, and my response to that would be, then don't vote for those people.
Yeah.
I mean, those people still have to get elected. They have to persuade their peers that they can do the job. You could always get someone running who's not qualified, but like, then don't vote for that person.
Yeah, and like you said, regardless of what a person's substantive level is, they will be doing the same job when they're sitting in that president's chair. It's not
Exactly.
gonna, we're not gonna say, oh, well, you're an FS2 at the level 5, so you're gonna do less work. You're still gonna
Exactly.
be doing the same work. So it also makes it a lot easier to predict for budgets and
Yeah.
everything like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it makes good sense for a number of those reasons. And I also think, I mean, it's like, given my responsibilities as an FS4, when you look at what's required of an FS4, I mean, leading teams and doing some, being responsible for sort of nuanced negotiations and things like that, it's appropriate. But also, like, a 7-member staff organization, that's about what you manage as a deputy director. I mean, I think the salary fits, frankly,
Yeah.
for what we've got. And the other thing is, I mean, in accordance with the FS contract, which basically, like, right now, my current service agreement. Oh, sorry, just a moment. I'm just going to pause the recording for a moment.
Okay.
Sorry, back after dealing with my dog. And I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I do have another question that's tied to the budget. I just wanted to know, when the new president comes in, if there is a training budget for them, just because you're having people come in and they may not necessarily be familiar with everything that goes into, running a union or being part of a union in that particular role. So I just was curious if there would be a training budget associated with the position to allow them to take, some specialized courses, either just before they start or shortly after they start, to help them in their job.
I think that's a great suggestion. And I think, I mean, right now we have a training budget for executive committee. And the president has a budget a small budget for, like, president's initiatives. So between those two, that has covered, the needs that we've had. I've gone to executive committee, over the years a couple times and said, hey, I want to do this leadership training, or this thing, and it's come out of that budget. But I think, like, so for 2023, when we know, when we've got a new person coming, right, and a new person would start in August, I think we would probably look at, in the budget process for then, saying, okay, if we've got a new person, what are their training needs? And, then we could look at that point, whether we have a specific president's training budget. And hopefully, you would probably only need the bigger amounts, right, every 3 years.
Yeah.
Because the person would be coming in. But that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, the other, I was just on the subject, I remembered what I was going to say about the salary. I mean, right now we have a good relationship with our staff. Everything is great. But I do think that the point about having, the salary level not fluctuate too much is important in managing the executive director or the senior staff person, because there could be a perception, right? If I move on and say the person who was coming in at a much lower salary, effectively you're saying, that's a junior person. And that would be unfair to both parties, because that person is still going to be the executive director's boss.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to set up those kinds of dynamics if you don't have to, I think.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that makes sense. Anything more on salary and budget?
Nope.
Okay. I guess there were also a couple of technical questions that had come up about, so what happens if, say, someone is at their substantive is a lower salary, what happens, like, with reimbursing their benefits and stuff? And I think, what would happen would be that, we would pay their benefits into the public service system as they do with me, like for LWAP. And then any gap, they would have to figure something out. Like that would just be part of their service agreement that, maybe that person would get money we would buy an RRSP for that person for the extra amount or something like that. Right. So
Yeah.
there would need to be something handled with our lawyers, and that would be a regulatory kind of thing, regulations that would be worked out in the moment, but it's doable.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next question is, well, what are the minimum requirements? What should be required for somebody to stand for president? So what we're proposing is that you must be we're proposing you'd have to be a substantive FS. And it has to be a substantive FS rather than, it can't be an acting FS, because in order to take leave without pay, you have to take leave without pay from your FS position, from a substantive position. And if like the department is not going to have somebody in an acting position and then give them leave from it. Like that person actually substantively belongs to another union. Their leave would have to be from their current position. And so they could not serve as PAFSO as PAFSO president. So you have to be a substantive FS who meets the conditions of employment for the FS group. So that covers security clearance, bilingualism, all of those things. You would also, we propose, you must have served abroad in a position governed by the FS collective agreement, which would be important, right? Because some people might have been serving as EXs or other things for, a significant number of time for a minimum of 12 consecutive months in the 10 years prior to their nomination for their first term. So, I mean, we don't want to make the requirements like so restrictive that we don't get any candidates, but we figured that is a reasonable thing to require, that you have to have at least been out and seen what life abroad is like under the FS collective agreement to be able to properly represent the members. Any comments? Did you want to comment on that?
No, I think it makes sense. Like you said, you want somebody who has some experience abroad, so they at least have an idea where the membership is coming from when there's complaints or concerns that come up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I suspect there will be you'll just have to do some clarification when it first comes out, as we do all the time when we talk about substantive FS versus acting FS.
Yeah.
And then again, same thing for having served abroad. So when you say, governed by the FS collective agreement, you can do an IE in an FS box.
Yeah, no, true. We'll, we will definitely need to we'll need to develop some of these further in sort of regulations and information packages and so on. What we're focused on now to get this done is the language that's going to be in the Constitution. And, generally you only put the really minimum bare bones stuff in there, right?
Yeah.
The rest is dealt with by regulation and, by bylaws potentially, and all of those other kinds of things, rather than in the Constitution document. But do you think 12 consecutive months is enough? I mean, I personally think it is, because we do have some postings that are, a full posting is a 1-year posting.
Yeah, those are particular hardship ones. And that's usually when we're looking at the most recent HR exercises, they talk about 12 consecutive months.
Yeah. So we picked up that language from that. And then in the 10 years prior, we thought that was fair. I mean, because somebody could have done 2 postings, they could be back, but say maybe their last posting was as an EX. So, to get to that one where they were in an FS agreement, you might go 10 years.
Yeah.
So we thought that was reasonable. Then, the other thing is, this is an Ottawa-based position. And so we propose to require that people are based within reasonable daily commuting distance of the National Capital Region for the duration of their term or terms. So, who knows, right? In 5 years, there might be like a great bullet train or something from Toronto to Ottawa, and maybe Toronto would be reasonable daily commuting distance. But the idea is that, you have to be able to present yourself for meetings in Ottawa on relatively short notice. I think like they will, it's all TBD what work from home versus, working in the office will look like. But probably, I personally intend to be in the office for at least 1 day a week from now on. And I imagine that would be, the requirement. But, you do have to manage staff. You do have to build relationships in Ottawa. Like, this is what we want to avoid, is a situation where someone is saying, well, I'm going to try to do this from, the Bahamas or something.
No, it makes sense because, like you said, meetings tend to sometimes be last minute, particularly when it's the negotiation stage of the bargaining agreement, or meetings face to face with other bargaining agents, just because not everybody wants to do those meetings over an open source platform like Zoom. So it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and we just want to make it clear that this is an Ottawa-based position. I mean, there's always room for a little flexibility for, what needs to happen. I mean, I'm sure there will be situations where, someone has to be out of town for a week or two and they work remotely, but it's not a work from anywhere job. And I don't think it can be. The other thing is, so we're proposing a 3-year term in line with the, the normal assignment cycles for headquarters. And partly, because like anybody who's been on post, right? Your first year, you're figuring things out. Your second year, maybe you start to hit your stride. Your third year, you're either, then, you're really in it, right? And if you're moving on, you then have enough time to wrap things up and do a proper handover and so on. So we propose that no more than 2 consecutive terms. So somebody could run for a re-election for a second term for a total of 6 years. But we don't want presidents for life, right? And we don't want barnacles, or somebody coming in and saying, I'm just going to hang out in CAFSO for the 15 years before my retirement. So we propose that you could run again, but that you would have to wait at least 12 months. So if someone else was elected and say stepped down or something 12 months later, okay, sure, previous president could run again, but not until that 12 months had passed.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that that's just a safeguard. I mean, some people were saying, maybe the person shouldn't be allowed to run again. And I don't think that that is sensible either, because there could be things going on, right? Like COVID, for example, where, you really are going to benefit from some continuity and having an experienced person. And we don't want to preclude that. But
no, like you said, if people aren't happy, then you don't have to vote for them.
Exactly. And, that so that brings up the question of what if, we've tended not to have huge numbers of people lining up to be on XCOM. I mean, we've only had elections once in the time that either of the times that I've been president, because I was president before from 2009 to 2011. We've only ever had one set of elections. Normally we have people acclaimed, and sometimes we're out like chasing down candidates. So hopefully, the presidency will be appealing enough to attract some candidates. But in the instance that there is only one candidate, what we're proposing is that name would be released to the members along with the person's campaign biography and the things they submit for their nominations, and that we would extend the nomination period by another say 10 days or so to allow somebody else to come forward and then, we would extend the campaign period and so on. And if no candidates come forward, then the person would be acclaimed, which I think is fair and reasonable. There was one proposal, someone from the consulting company had suggested that you could put that name forward and people could vote against that person.
And then what happens if
then nobody else comes forward?
Yeah.
I mean, I also, like, I don't think I would even have stood for president if I knew people would come out and vote against me without having an alternative candidate. I mean, I think that's kind of terrifying. So,
well, it also puts us in the position where if you only get one candidate and let's say everybody votes against them, you're not going to get another candidate. So now what are you doing?
Exactly. You're kind of stuck. So, I mean, I think this is fair. And this also says to people, look, this is who you're going to get. If you don't like this person, then this is your opportunity to challenge them.
Yeah.
Which I think that's reasonable. That sounds reasonable to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments on requirements or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so we need to do some constitutional amendments to make this official. So we need to add a new section on the direct election, how exactly that would be done, and what the threshold would be, and so on. Which, I mean, I think it needs to be a simple majority. Then we need to add a section on the role of create an elections and nominations committee to vet the candidates, make sure everybody does really, everyone is a substantive FS, everyone has had their 12 months abroad, that they were in an FS position, that they meet all the terms and conditions, and so on and so forth. We need to specify that the president remains a member of PAFSO, pays dues, and is considered a member in good standing. And then we need to what I'm proposing is that the president is not a member of any stream for the stream counts. But also to reduce the number of members of the executive committee to 14 plus the president. So, basically you'd be taking the president one position out of the mix. You still have 2 members for each stream, and then you'd have 4 members at large. And the president would effectively be a member at large, would come from that quota.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it fits. Then, at the same time, we're going to look at some of these other additional amendments. I would like to include mention up front in the Constitution of our PAFSO values, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, because those were not in there in 1967 when the Constitution was made. And so, I think now it makes sense to have that spelled out. We also want to formalize the current practice that the president is vice chair of the collective bargaining committee. And then we want to amend the reference to the executive director in the collective bargaining section to say that a senior labor negotiator chairs the collective bargaining committee, rather than specifying the position of executive director, just because we may change the title of that position. It's, as we're looking at how we should be structured, whether there might be a better label for that position. And you shouldn't really have staff positions by name in the constitution of an organization anyway. And it also would allow us to have the flexibility of, say, hiring, if we ever wanted to hire a consultant to represent us instead of a staff person. But we do want to make sure that it's clear that it is a labor relations expert, not a PAFSO member, like who would lead the negotiations. And also we want to make it explicit that the president chairs the professional committee. Right now it's implied, the president chairs the professional committee and the executive director chairs the collective bargaining committee, but we think that it should be, we have an opportunity to spell it out in the Constitution. Was there anything, can you think of anything else that we should look at? Well,
Who represents us at the NJC?
the president, well, the president does, yeah. So maybe that should be in there.
I would put something like that in there as well,
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right.
because that's the big one I'm thinking of is the NJC.
Yeah. 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 No, you're right. Okay, that's a good one. Anything else? We have a
The only other amendments I can see, but it's not a specific amendment, would be kind of changing the language where it's necessary to make it gender neutral.
yeah, I mean, that's something that we're going to look at, but to be honest, like that level of amendment, you know, that's more of a kind of a like a technical typo type amendment. I'm just reluctant to present members in this big year with would basically it would basically be like every second clause of the Constitution.
Well, you could do a broad one saying, you know, it would be amended, language would be amended to reflect gender neutrality without changing the substantive meaning of the clause.
Yeah, maybe we could put something in that says all of this should be interpreted to apply equally to all genders. Because I had put they in the language around the president, but yeah, maybe I could put something in there. But we're also in the middle of our GBA plus analysis of the collective agreement, the FSDs. And, you know, she's also looked a little bit at the Constitution. So that whole kind of, you know, big, broad look at our overall approach is coming down the line. I'm also thinking that it might be good to put something in there about strategic planning, that there's a strategic review every, you know,
so
every 5 years or whatever. And because we did have language to say that the president leads the strategic planning of PAFSO. But if
you don't say how often that is.
Well, or, you know, or maybe do, right? Because the problem was like it was left vague before, and we didn't have a strategic plan, or we had never had a strategic review in 50 years.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a strategic, we had never had a strategic plan.
Yeah, so putting language in there, you know, the president leads the strategic review, which shall take place every 5 years or something along.
Or, you know, at least at a minimum maximum of 10-year intervals, something like that, just so that it's in there, and you know that it's not a shock to everybody's system that you do have something like that happen, right? Because if you let it go too long, it kind of
it makes it worse.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it then, you know, depending on the personalities involved, it can kind of come across as, well, why are you insisting on this now? You know, has somebody done something wrong? And no, it's just, you know, everybody should be reviewed like everything needs to get reviewed periodically.
Exactly.
Check your assumptions and so I'll have a look at that. We also have our draft out to a consultant from Institute on Governance who gave back some preliminary comments, but you know, we'll look at any you know, any additions that she might have some technical points for how exactly this should be done.
Okay.
Yeah. So any other questions or comments?
No, I think that covers it.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much. Yeah. I'm gonna stop the recording and say goodbye to everybody who might be listening. And anyone who is listening, you can always reach out to me, pamela.eastfeld@pafso.com, and follow up on any points between now and the vote. So thanks very much.